exploring ag technology and machinery for nearly 20 years. When UAVs began circling in earnest over ag, they created quite a buzz. With so much noise in the space, we really want this webinar to be a conversation about where the technology is today, who's using it, and whether it's worth the investment. Ultimately, we want to know whether or not these devices can really be game changers for agriculture to help you make better in-season decisions. And it's a question we're going to tackle in today's discussion with our impressive panel of experts. So first, let me introduce Noah Freeman. He's the manager of Precision Agriculture Technologies at AgReliant Genetics. Since January 2014, Noah has led the development of AgReliant Genetics' precision agriculture platform, Advantage Acre. He has a Bachelor of Science from the University of Illinois in Crop Sciences, a Master of Science from the University of Illinois in Plant Pathology and Breeding, a graduation certificate in Geographic Information Science from Northwest Missouri State University, and is currently working to complete a doctorate in Agriculture Systems Management from Purdue University with a focus on precision agriculture. Ray Asebedo is the Assistant Professor of Precision Agriculture at Kansas State University. A Kansas native, Ray received his bachelor's in agronomy and his PhD in soil fertility. He has focused his research program on developing agronomic algorithms to drive the artificial intelligence of ground and aerial autonomous vehicles. He enjoys working with producers in the field and helping them utilize technology in their farming practices to maximize their profit per acre. We're also going to hear from Patrick Lohman, the Vice President of Partnerships at PrecisionHawk, and Tim Wynn, Business Development Director at DJI. The pair will talk briefly about the idea behind their partnership and the Smarter Farming Package. So let's set up a few ground rules first off before we dive into the panel discussion. We are going to start with a 20-minute panel discussion with our two experts. Then we'll hear from PrecisionHawk and DJI, and then close with a 15-minute Q&A. Please chat your questions as we go, and we'll answer them during the Q&A at the end. If we don't have time to answer all of your questions, all of the questions as well as the answers will be compiled and emailed to every attendee. And if you're posting about the webinar on social media, please be sure to include hashtag #SmarterFarming in your message. So let's get started. In a 2016 Successful Farming Technology and Ag study, we surveyed nearly 1,100 farmers and asked them, if given the choice, would you prefer to purchase your own UAV or hire a service? 36% said they would purchase their own, while 49% said they would hire a service. 15% said they would do both. So let's turn it over to our experts. Ray, I'm going to start with you. Can you comment on why one choice might be better than the other?
Yeah, sure, of course. Hi, everybody. This is Ray Asebedo. I think it has a lot to do on that particular farmer's circumstances. Like over here in Kansas, a considerable number of our farmers actually purchase their own drones and fly their own fields. They're very multi-generational. They got 3 generations of family on the farm, and a lot of their kids are coming back to the farm after finishing their undergraduates, and they are the ones conducting all the flights on the farm. But then we see I have ran into plenty of other farm operations where it's a smaller workforce, and they would prefer to actually outsource the collection of UAV data, and then just want to get the recommendation from the consultant or service they hire. And so I think it has a lot to depend on what is the current management operation that you have on your farm, and making the determination whether it's better for you and your operation to have your own UAV or to go ahead and hire it out as a service.
And Noah, what are you hearing? Are you hearing some similar things as Ray is hearing?
Yeah, I think it's really similar to what Ray is seeing. It has a lot to do with the operation and how much time they want to invest in, how much, not just time in the flying, but becoming an expert in using the technology. Over the past several years, it's become much easier to purchase your own and actually learn how to fly it. But even with that said, there still is a learning curve that everybody has to go through when they first start flying.
So that leads into our next point about the pain points of drones and integration. We have myriad companies out there offering up drones, fixed wing, rotary wing. Talk about the pain points in the integration process.
Yeah, so anybody, the first few times you use a drone, you have that sinking fear that it's going to fly away on you. I'll say that the quadcopters have made that much better than using the fixed wings, and at least giving you that sense of control and integration. I think a lot of it comes down to the first pain points, especially if you're purchasing them. It's just getting comfortable using the technology, making sure you're within the regulations and following those regulations, making sure you're following them. With the new FAA guidance and rules that have come out, I think that's really going to help ease some of that. Before, we were just kind of living on the edge, not quite sure what we can do, should do, what was allowed and what wasn't. So with that change, we've really moved forward with that pain point going away, but it's still a new piece of technology. Most farmers were not pilots to start with, so they're not used to flying. So there's a really steep learning curve to start with.
And Ray, what pain points are you hearing from growers?
Well, I can say firsthand from growers, and then also my own perspective being utilizing this and for crop monitoring, is that there was a lot of pain points dealing with the fixed wings on how do you safely launch them, and then what about when the flight's done, you come into land, do you have enough of a landing runway? Most people didn't like crashing their drones into the corn. And, they had issues when they did belly landing, some of the parts would break. And so the multi-rotors with the vertical takeoff and landing capability, that really helped out, especially in the humid part of the corn belt here, where we just don't have big landing areas. And so that helped out considerably. But, probably the biggest woes that was at the start was simply just making sure that the flight controllers didn't have some sort of a GPS issue on where the home point was. People would get close to the batteries being all the way done, and then it would go home. And then the home point was from the day before, and it's flying to the other county. And so there was issues with flyaways back in the day dealing with that, but a lot of the DJI's newer systems now have rectified that issue and made that very simplified for the end user. Another very important pain point for drone use in agriculture has been battery life, flight times, and how can I fly 1,000 acres in a day? How do I have enough batteries going on for that? And so having enough batteries in the rotation, constantly charging them, methodologies for doing that was a common pain point. And when we were talking about even 2 years ago, when our flight times were only 10, 15 minutes. It just really wasn't long enough, and you needed to have a lot of batteries on hand. And, most farmers at the time really just did not like that concept. And so that's where you really saw the whole, what's better for flying my fields, multi-rotors or fixed wings. But now with multi-rotors getting closer to 40-minute flight times, flying 160 acres is no problem.
And you touched on this a little bit. What about maintenance? I mean, because as you said, these devices do crash. What do they have to keep in mind when it comes to maintenance?
The biggest thing about maintenance on any given drone is that what I like to do is preventative maintenance. And so when you go buy a drone, you need to ask important questions on if we did have a crash or a motor's wearing out, how much is it to replace an arm on the drone? Or how much is it to replace an ESC? How much is it to replace the motor? And then how available are they? And if that company has any recommendations on how many flight hours they have to recommend before you actually start replacing motors, and that way you don't experience any failures mid-flight during the season. And so I would say, those are important critical questions that any farm should ask or service should ask before they buy a drone. Is what is a maintenance package that this company is offering, and what is the expected life expectancy for this drone? How many seasons can you get into it?
So we've heard about a lot of different uses that these devices have the potential to help with on the farm, from crops to livestock. So, what's some of the useful analysis that these devices can do, to really help farmers in their day-to-day operations? What's available and what's being used? Noah, do you want to start us out?
Yeah, I can. Well, I think this actually, one of the pain points that a lot of farmers are having is, what do I do with these images? So I go and purchase my drone, and it's really fun to go and fly around the house and take a lot of pictures. But then there's that next pain point of data integration and actually trying to go from having that really cool picture to actually getting some type of data out of it that I can make a management decision. And I think we're just starting to be on the cusp of that. Using PrecisionHawk's platform, the fact that I can go in and I can fly a survey of my field with either their plane or a DJI product. I can go in, I can fly it, I can upload my images, so no longer do I have to have the software on my computer. I don't have to worry if my computer is fast enough. But I can upload those and actually get everything stitched together. And then at that point, start using some of the algorithms that they or others have developed to actually take that image and try to make a management decision. I really think we're right on the edge of starting to make management decisions. One of the struggles we have, at least with corn and soybean farming, is by the time the seed goes in the ground, about 70% of your decisions are made for you. So figuring out where we can make that next management decision is a really difficult step that we're all having to move to as this technology gets more integrated.
And Ray, how about you?
Yeah, I agree with Noah on a lot of that. And for the past 5 years, engineering and agriculture has been heavily focused on hardware capabilities. And it's just now to where we're really starting to focus on the software, the algorithms that drive these machines. And so we don't have the expectation, or shouldn't have the expectation, that farmer services should pick this up and have to become remote sensing agronomists, experts, and do all their own interpretations of those images. We can get the algorithms developed to go and turn that from an image into actionable information. And so they would have a baseline yield estimation and a baseline nitrogen recommendation, let's say, and then that farmer or crop consultant can apply their expertise on top of that to make any sort of finite adjustments. And I agree with Noah that we are really just on the cutting edge now of where we're seeing these algorithms be developed and integrated into a well-designed system. Because, the deal is if even if we have the best algorithm in the world, it always gets everything right. But unless it's put into a nice, concise, well-designed package to where the farmer or crop consultant can just push the button, upload, and get the direct information that they need, they won't adopt. And so it has to be a well-designed system all the way through, even to just get the algorithms to be utilized.
So you talked about this a little bit. Let's talk some more about the uses. Where do we see this industry or these drones benefiting farmers the most? Is it in nitrogen recommendations? Are there other areas that you're seeing some movement in there?
I think nitrogen recommendations, it can be a piece of it. It won't be the only piece of making nitrogen recommendations using a drone. A drone, when you take any picture, all it's going to do is it's going to tell you a pixel is a different color. You still need to have some underlying data, the metadata about that field of what's happening. Just a pixel color doesn't tell me I need nitrogen or don't need nitrogen. It tells me I have a difference from one place in the field to the other. So you still have to layer that in with nitrogen modeling, soil modeling, and really a good agronomist to go along with it. When we start looking at, I think it's a layered approach to when we look at corn and soybean agriculture, moving from production agriculture to the seed production to research. Each level you can see more and more usage because you need more and more data. When we go through at AgReliant Genetics in our research program, we need a lot more data on all of our hybrids and our inbreds for production than we need that a regular corn and soybean farmer uses. So the analysis that we need to characterize every single inbred and hybrid, there's a lot more the data that we need or can use that the normal production farmer won't need.
And Ray, how about from your perspective?
Yeah, so I kind of like to take this in steps of focus of what is our farmers telling us that they need first, and they always want help with nitrogen recommendations simply because it changes every year what their optimum nitrogen rate should be depending on soil by weather by crop interactions, and then they want that nitrogen recommendation first simply because it's also a high cost input. And so from my perspective, that what we've been seeing is a lot of emphasis and requests for drone use has been on the nutrient management side of crop production. And so if we're looking at this as a stepping stone, a lot of people are want nitrogen recommendations. And another common one that I get is, can we help out with dealing with fungicide applications on winter wheat and other crops, because that's a major cost for them. And so I see this going in steps. You shouldn't have the expectation that the UAV is going to be able to solve all the problems in agriculture right out of the gate. That's not the case. Developing a nitrogen recommendation algorithm takes a lot of years of work, simply because it's not based on just an image. It's based on, it brings in other ancillary data, just like Noah said, dealing with soils and weather, and building in the agronomist perspective into the drone's AI code, and then making sure that it's in a usable format that any agronomist or crop consultant will do. And so, heavy in our area of the Great Plains, dealing with small grains, it's been heavily focused on dealing with nutrient management. That's out of the request of our farmers.
Laurie, I think if one thing that Ray and I both emphasize is the need for a good agronomist. With this technology increasing like it is, not only in drones but other precision ag areas, the agronomic foundation that both farmers and consultants have is going to become more and more important to figure out how to use them properly.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I have to ask both of you, we're in low commodity prices right now. There's so much technology out there. We're asking farmers to adopt yet another piece of technology. How do you justify that in $3 corn and $9, $10 soybean?
When I look at I think there's more opportunity in low commodity prices, because the margin for error for a farmer is much less. When you have a smaller margin for error, you have to then take and make better agronomic decisions. A bad agronomic decision can really hurt you and make you go from profitable to not profitable. Where when you have $6, $7 corn, you can make mistakes and still be profitable. So I think the farmers have to be more careful in what they invest in, but making the correct agronomic decisions and the correct technology decisions have a much bigger payoff in the overall viability of a farm at $3.50 corn than they do at $7 corn.
Yeah. Yeah, Noah's right on that. And the thing is when at times like this, when the margins for error, farmers just can't make any errors. They're looking to make the right decision every time. Utilization of drone technology with the right algorithm. They're looking for that helpful guidance on being ready to get the reassurance that they're making the right decision and it's going to help them be more profitable. And, that's one of the whole reasons why they hire a crop consultant. And, crop consultants nowadays, I get a lot of calls from them on wanting to purchase UAVs and what algorithms are out there to help them refine that recommendation to a T, so they're making the most profit per acre they can. And so what we're looking at with these UAVs is them being a management tool to assist the agronomists in the field. And, that was a common question that I always get is, do I eventually see like UAVs or robots, basically, negating the agronomist if it has a well-designed agronomic AI? And I would say no, is that we're just bringing these in as a tool to help them make a better decision, make a more refined recommendation, to where that standard error around that nitrogen recommendation is much less. And so we make a lot more profit per acre. And Noah's absolutely right. If you want to see precision ag technology excel when they're going to be the most viable, it's when commodity prices are low.
Well, you bring up a good point too, Ray, about this replacing, agronomists, because I was hearing that, in the very early stages of this, that this was going to be replacing those boots on the ground, when it's only enhancing boots on the ground and helping us hone in on those specific spots in our fields that need that further attention. Would you both agree, disagree?
I would agree with that.
I completely agree with it. I think the agronomists might become more important and more needed than before.
Yeah, the funny thing is now with utilizing UAV technology, the scouting efficiency of agronomists has increased. We're covering more fields over a given day. And so we're actually finding more of the problem sooner. And so it's actually taking more agronomists to go out to the field to help address these issues and provide a better recommendation and have them implemented in a timely manner so that we minimize any yield loss.
So take a look at aerial imagery. Let's look ahead a little bit to the future here. You know, how will the aerial imagery continue to develop on the farm? Is it going to be more well understood, more accepted? Talk a little bit about that and how drones can help push this forward.
I think the biggest deal with it is that aerial imagery will get more accepted because farmers, crop consultants will get more exposure to it. You know, especially when you start showing them thermal imagery or near infrared imagery, it generally just doesn't jive with a farmer right at the start because that's not how they're used to seeing the world. But the more drones have made this kind of imagery, NDVI, NDRE, more accessible. And so when they start getting more and more exposure to it, they can start wrapping their minds around it and seeing how those color variations within the field, placing the soil layers in their head and understanding what that impact is. What is that environmental interaction and how it's affecting their grain yield. So if anything, I think drones are going to help aerial imagery become more accepted as a common management tool to utilize.
I think one of the other big places we'll see is when we go beyond just looking at the picture and getting some insights derived from that image. So you go from the picture, from just analyzing the image to actually getting some type of a feedback that is algorithm based, not just color changes in the picture, but saying that certain areas of the field that a certain management practice could change what your recommendation would be. And even as you move forward, somehow putting some probabilities of a return on investment. So whether it's a herbicide or a fungicide application, insecticide, you can see a problem, and once we say that there's a problem, they're actually giving a management solution of applying a certain fungicide at a certain rate or timing, and giving what the probabilities of that ROI would be.
So your advice to growers, how do they get started? You know, where's the best starting point here? I know we've talked about being able to purchase a UAV versus hiring a service. You know, what if they want to experiment? Where do they go to start?
Well, I think you can hire somebody to do 1-2 fields, get yourself comfortable with it, working with an agronomist, getting some insights for how they've used imagery. So that'd be the one way to start. Another way to start, if you want to go and purchase a UAV, you can start with an inexpensive one. More or less the consumer grade hobby versions. Get comfortable with flying it, use it, learn how to go and take pictures. Probably just using an RGB photography with it. And then once you get comfortable, you start asking questions. Oh, here's some other things I want to do with it. At that point, you can then move to the higher levels of drone usage. So going to get a better drone, or maybe at that point you decide you don't want to fly the drone yourself and you want to go hire a consultant. So jump in slowly, get your feet wet, and I think, at least I found for myself, once you get that first one, you're going to want to keep using it. You're going to have more questions. You're going to start getting more insights, and it'll just kind of steamroll from there.
Ray, any thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with Noah on that. And, you know, that's a common question that I get from farmers is like, how do I get started in this? And I always like to make the suggestion that they start with a consumer-grade drone. Most of our farmers here in Kansas have gone off and either bought a Phantom 3 or a Phantom 4. They fly around, they get the bird's eye view of the field, they take some pictures, and then their mind starts rolling on what can I do with this? And then they start thinking, well, if I had a multispectral imager, what can I do from there? And those are conversations that I've had with a lot of them. And so, it's just that process of working through it. And the nice thing is when they have an actual little drone in their hand and they're flying it on a consecutive basis, they start to think about how can I integrate this into my operation. And I think that's a critical thing. And that goes back, whether that question of whether or not I purchase a UAV or hire a service. But, it's when they have the option to start utilizing that imagery and that drone on a day-to-day basis, they really start thinking heavily about the integration And then it's from there that they start to think about, well, if I upgrade up to the next level of drone that has thermal and multispectral, what can I get out of it, and should I go ahead and make that upgrade up? But I generally don't recommend people who are brand new to it to start off by buying a $20,000 unit, simply because we got to manage expectations on what it can currently do. And so I think if they go ahead and start off at a lower tier and then work their way up, by the time they get to that enterprise level drone, they have a firm understanding of how they can use drone imagery on their farm, and they have direct expectations and direct questions to ask that seller on what this drone can provide.
Well, and I think with Part 107, now the final rules and regulations are in place for small UAVs. Where's it going to go from here? I mean, is this Part 107, is that going to help push the industry forward? What are your thoughts on that, guys?
I think it's going to help out this industry because, before when the regulations, it was you had to literally get a private pilot's license in order to fly these drones. That was a major limitation.
Yeah.
But now having the Part 107 out, you just go ahead and take the remote pilot's license test, and then you can be out flying. And so, if anything, this is really opening up the floodgates to this industry where farmers, consultants, or other service providers don't have to worry about extreme recourse, and so they can go ahead and do it. FAA has streamlined it a lot in comparison to the 333 exemption, so it's basically easy for anybody to get the remote pilot's license and start flying. So I think this is really going to open things up.
I'll say I don't have much to add to what Ray said, and I agree that this is a great thing. People no longer have to worry about, am I really doing the right thing? Is this legal? So I think it's going to really move us forward quite fast.
Yeah. One thing I'll also mention is that, the common question I had from people on the farm was, all right, if I'm flying this Phantom 4 around and using it on my farm, is it legal or illegal? And there was a lot of muddy. It was very muddy water. There was a lot of confusion on that. I believe on the technicality, because it was a for-profit commercial operation, that they need to have the 333 exemption. But that raised so many concerns with a lot of farmers and service providers that they just flat out stopped using drones simply because they just didn't want to have any legal issues. So Part 107 is going to help out a lot with that.
Well, thank you both. I hate to cut off this conversation, but I want to keep us on track. So what we're going to do next, ultimately, we need to have scalable data collection that is repeatable with rapid turnaround and easily fits into a business to make a UAV a valuable tool for ag. So right now I'm going to turn it over to Tim Wynn with DJI and Pat Lohman from PrecisionHawk. We're going to talk briefly about their partnership and the value of their collaboration around the Smarter Farming Package.
Thanks, Laurie. I think this is one of the biggest reasons why PrecisionHawk and DJI teamed up together to create this Smarter Farming Package. Right? It's an easy-to-use and complete turnkey system that anyone can use. I always like to relate it to the PC or computer market. Right? In the beginning, there were always those that would go out, choose to piece together components, and build their own solution. But at the end of the day, 90% of users out there just want something that works, that gives them the best results, and one package that seamlessly works all together. So this package that we put together, you get a fully assembled drone. It comes with two sensors, a visual sensor, a multispectral sensor, a set of batteries, a rugged case, software to automate the drone flight so a pilot won't have to worry about manually flying over their fields, and then also the software that does all of the necessary processing to get that data from the images that are collected in the sky. So we chose the Mitrice 100. So this drone is rugged with a carbon fiber frame, comes fully assembled and in its own case, so a user can really take it out of their truck, power it on, select an area to fly through the app, and then be up in the air within 5 or 10 minutes. It's really quite easy to get the hardware and software to work together to get all the important data. And I'd like to go over some of the sensors that we're providing with this. So of course you get a visual sensor. This is our standard X3 camera. And you get the ability to do, plant counting. You can do all your scouting, 3D mapping, and also inspection of different areas. Another key aspect of this is that you get the multispectral camera. And this allows you to do something that no other package allows in our lineup. This camera only comes with this package, and we created this specifically for the Smarter Farmer package. So you get the ability to monitor all your plant health and get that accurate data that you need in agriculture. So kind of going over it again, for this $8,300 package, you get a full, from start to finish, solution that you can take from a truck out to the field, fly your mission, go back, analyze all the data, and it outputs all the necessary information that somebody would need in the field. And it's a great setup for somebody that doesn't want to worry about all the flying characteristics or building the solution. Just go out and fly. You also have the ability to fly for 35 minutes with one set of batteries. And so that covers almost 200 acres per battery. And of course, it scales up easily if you just purchase additional batteries.
So Tim, I'm curious, what were you hearing from growers on, how you developed this Smarter Farming package? Was this something that they really wanted? You talked about it earlier, and this, being a challenge with the data and the analysis?
Right. There was just so many different options out there where they would have to buy a drone from one manufacturer, try to find a software solution that may or may not work. And it was just too many different variables to consider to get the data that they needed. So by putting this package together, somebody can easily find out that, it just works, right? From start to finish, this package is everything that you need.
So talk about the customer service component too, Tim, because I think that's an important piece of what this system offers. What if I have a question or an issue?
Right. So there are two aspects of it. DJI, we do the hardware. So definitely we will be able to fully support anything and everything that needs to be done, whether it's maintenance on the batteries or the motors, the frame. We have a full set of replacement parts if need be. And then also PrecisionHawk, they have the ability to do customer service for the analytics side of it. So the software for the flight automation, but also their software where you are getting the ability to produce the results that you need, and they can help solve any troubleshooting issues.
And what are you hearing from the field on this package? You've obviously got guys out there using it. What are they really loving about this package?
Yeah, they're just loving the ability to, fly with one system, right? You have the ability to take a regular camera, our X3, the visual sensor. They can do a variety of different things, whether it's inspection or mapping or just scouting out a different area, and then easily being able to swap to a different camera, the multispectral sensor, and then getting a whole new ability of different types of data, all from the same system. And so this does do more than one thing, and it's all one system that's easy to use. Because DJI, we are the largest manufacturer of drones, and we do have the ability to provide a great user experience when it comes to flying a drone. And we take the complicated ability out of it by automating most of it.
So let's talk about the software.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Pat Lohman with PrecisionHawk. I help lead up the business development and strategic partnerships team. And just to start with, we've been working with drones in agriculture for about 7 years now. And we've definitely seen the challenges that drones have had over the years to scale into some type of workable, streamlined workflow. And one of the biggest ones that we've been asked over the years is, okay, it's great if I'm in the middle of a city and I have these great bandwidth connections, but what happens when I'm in the middle of nowhere? What happens when I'm in Africa, right? And so we've strategically chosen to kind of separate our products into two buckets, both online and offline. There's a lot of great things you can do with the cloud, and this is how you connect to other systems. But we also realize the need to take things offline where bandwidth just isn't in existence. One example of this is the ability to cache maps before you go out to a field. And so that it's really important that you're not flying over a blank space on our app, that you can actually visually see on the interface where the drone exists. And then other things like, we have a data quality checking tool that can be done on your laptop in the field. We have the ability to add on offline processing. There's a lot of great things you can do when you start to spread it out to both kind of edge processing and cloud processing. Now to talk a little bit about an app that we created internally called Data Mapper in-flight. This is really the glue between the great hardware products that DJI has created and the great software and analytical products that PrecisionHawk has created. And the one thing that we've heard all along is if drones are going to exist in agriculture and other industries, it has to be extremely simple, to the point where anyone could really learn it within a matter of a couple of minutes. Press a button and it does everything for them. So what InFlight is, it's an iOS and Android app. It's completely free. So if you type in Data Mapper InFlight on either of those marketplaces, you can download and use it completely free. And what it does is it connects to the DJI drone. Basically, you outline your polygon of your field, or you can import a shapefile. And once you've done that, that kind of sets the boundaries of what the drone needs to fly and map within that boundary. And so you set your boundaries, you give it a flight name, you give it an altitude that you want to fly at, you connect the drone wirelessly, and once it gives you the go-ahead, you basically flip up one button, and everything is done autonomously from there. So your drone will take off vertically, reach altitude. It knows the correct flight path based on all the geometry that we've done behind the scenes. Knows when to take pictures, and then comes back and lands autonomously. And this also works with really any DJI drone. So if you're trying to start off with something simpler, like Ray and Noah said, it'll work with anything down to a Phantom 3. And then the next slide would be, how do you manage all this data? How do you process all this data? So once that drone lands, you pop out your SD card. It has a bunch of geotagged images on it, and you hit one button and upload that data to our cloud processing system called Data Mapper. Processing typically takes for agricultural fields anywhere from 20 to 60 minutes. So we've definitely sped up the processing speed over time, and the user will get notified as soon as that output is ready. Another thing that we put a lot of emphasis behind is the security of that system. Regardless of industry, we work with over 50 Fortune 500 companies, and the number one thing that they need to make sure happens is that we have a system that is fully secure. And also, it's important to know that we don't have this system that we're selling data to other people. No one has access to your information. and we've been vetted pretty thoroughly on that and have developed that system up over the past 3 or 4 years. And then next to talk about, I think our biggest expertise in this space, to Ray and Noah's point on the next slide, we really saw a big gap in trying to get solutions. And so, it's great to have a high-resolution map. There are things you can infer from that. But what we were hearing from our users was, we need to go beyond that. We need to know a certain trait and how that's measured in a field. And so our goal, really from the start of our company, has been to create that experience for the user and make sure that they don't have to be a remote sensing expert. So one of the taglines that we try to use and focus on as a mission is to democratize remote sensing. So we want, again, one button click and it spits out, has all the science behind it, but it spits out an answer very quickly. Most of the algorithms actually run in 5 to 10 minutes. So you get your 2D and 3D maps every time you fly as your kind of core geo-reference maps. And then the idea is to click on these different products, and we consider them like apps. They process automatically, and then they output not only in a picture, but they output in the formats needed to take that to the next level in a farm management software. So for instance, with the vegetation indices that we offer through this package, every time you click on it, it will create a gridded shapefile that actually pulls out all the statistics. And what you can do is take that straight into a farm management platform, and to Noah and Ray's point about the agronomist, an agronomist can look at that and say, how can I turn this into an action? And so we've tried to make that process as seamless as possible. Next slide. And so we have a number of vegetation indices depending on the time of season. We're definitely creating workflows to help the users know which one they should use when. But we've also put a lot of time and effort from our own team. We have about 20 remote sensing and machine learning specialists on staff. And they've been creating these automated algorithms for other outputs. So we saw one of the questions come across, what can you do post-planting? We put a lot of effort behind an app that will actually count how many plants you have in the field and create that as a shapefile output. So we're trying to measure these very specific traits and make sure that entire workflow is completely seamless. Next slide. So let's look at the bigger picture in how drones fit into an ecosystem. And I think this is the biggest challenge that's been faced. You can't take all these different components and come up with something that flows smoothly and can be used for decision making. And so, we're obviously trying to automate as much as we can on the flight side with DJI, and also on the application side with our algorithm marketplace. But how does that fit into a bigger scheme? And so, we really look at it as a cyclical workflow, and we're starting to take in other pieces of information from the farm to make algorithms smarter as well as decision making easier. And so the idea is to connect. We have an API that we connect to a lot of farm management platforms, and the idea is to make sure that every time you hit upload, you actually don't see it as a farmer until it ends up in your farm management platform in the right format. I guess I'll just kind of wrap it up before we go to the FAQ. I think one of the issues with drones historically is that there hasn't been a scalable way to consume them into a workflow like this. And so, we feel like through this partnership, we finally hit that mark by really trying to create that full stack package that no longer does someone have to piecemeal things together. It's affordable, it's easy to learn and use, and also brings decision-making value to the end user. So with that, I'll pass it back over to Laurie to start up some questions.
Great, thank you, Pat. Some great information there. So as Pat said, we're going to move into the Q&A portion. We've got about 15 minutes left, and if you are On social media, please remember #SmarterFarming. And if we don't get to all of your questions, again, we will email a full list to all the attendees. So first up, one of the questions is about diseases, which we touched on a little bit. So what are the advances to early detection of some diseases in crops? Do you have an example in which drones, multispectral sensors can help detect diseases? Ray, do you want to talk to that?
Sure. Yeah, sure. You know what? That's a common question that I get, especially in dealing with viticulture. A lot of people from France calling me on what do they need in order to identify diseases in their grapes. And in that regard, I generally like to favor multispectral imagers for that, and start to look at developing spectral keys for different diseases. And so that's one method. Or another is if you're strapped for cash and you can have a high spatial resolution RGB camera, methodologies have been worked on and are being developed to try to identify diseases with those kind of cameras. And so one of the best cameras probably would be able to use would be a hyperspectral camera, because you have oodles of bands available to you. But if you don't have $40,000 hanging around, then something like I like to utilize on like my own Mitrice 100. I have a 5-band MicaSense Red Edge, and then I have a DJI X3 for my high spatial RGB, and then I have a Clearview Pro R for my thermal. And so I'll bring that imagery in all together, and then I will bring in soils and weather data and start to model microclimates that favor specific diseases. And so I would start to do that more of a sensor data fusion approach to try to identify and make probabilities of what diseases are present.
One of the other questions we had to do with yield data. And this person is flying corn and soybean fields for yield data before harvest. And this information is used for entries into the National Corn and Soybean Association contest. Are there any late growth algorithms that would be helpful for doing this?
Yeah, this is Pat. There's not currently one on the marketplace, but you will see it pop up in Q1 of 2017. And essentially the idea is to track maturity within specific crops, so that if it turned another color, does that apply to the time of season that it should have turned to that color, I guess is the way to think of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Real quick, this is Noah. One thing we always have to remember about any imagery product is ground truthing is still a key. We can't just go take an image and think that we know the answer. And I think yield data is especially important with that. One of the powerful tools that we can use in imagery on basically corn, once you're about R2 or so, if you can go and take an image, actually probably about VT to R2, you can take an image and then use that image to know where to go and actually sample. And you could then come back and do your standard yield estimations in corn. So number of plants, number of how many ears there are, current number of kernels on an ear, and basically then correlate that to your different zones of the field. So I think there's still a great case for making we have to go do some ground truthing with all of these UAV data sets that we're getting back, especially yield data estimates.
Yeah, I second Noah on that. And so like on our corn nitrogen recommendation algorithms that we have been developing, there's a yield estimation component of that, and all of that is small plots and also large fields, and we ground truth every bit of it. And so then that way the yield estimation part of the algorithm is very accurate and precise for the specific environments that it was being designed for. And that's another important part, is that are we talking generalized yield estimation models, or are we talking more site-specific, environment-specific? Those things come into play. Another important thing is just like Noah said, from what we can see, and you figure, is that you get to R2, you get to R4, especially R4, you start, if you got some good ground truth data, and you start having a pretty robust data set for making yield estimations, not a lot can go wrong from or 4 to maturity to impact yield. And so your relationship between spectral data and yield starts to get to be extremely strong. And so from this person's question, eventually are you going to be able to utilize your drone imagery to help you make those accurate yield predictions to put into that database? Well, absolutely. But what you'll want to know is what environment was it designed for, and if there's any limitations, and how much ground truthing was actually done to develop it.
One of the other questions we had was about real-life examples. Is there real-life quantifiable data that shows the farmers or the ag consultants using the Smarter Farming package, sensors, and imagery to make mid-season corrections that produce positive results? Pat, do you want to talk to that?
Yes, we do have some limited examples, and the idea of us creating algorithms is actually we're trying to build them directly around decisions that are being made by a farmer already. And so there's definitely a time component of someone going out and walking in a field, and everyone can value their time differently. There's also opportunity value of finding something early that you might not have known about if you had to regularly walk your field. But there's also these applications of either saving chemicals or increasing yield. And the Smarter Farming package, it didn't actually hit the market until about June. So we don't have enough data yet, but we're certainly getting good feedback on some of these applications.
Okay. So probably the answer to this next question is to be determined. Are there any statistics to show cost savings if we use a drone?
Yeah, during our development of these algorithms at Kent State University that I've been working on since 2008, we do our development and validation directly in the farmer's field. And a lot of these farmers who we started developing with, we're still working with them now. And so they have been more than willing to go ahead and apply to their large-scale fields on some of them to help validate and see what the profit per acre and the return on investment would be. And a lot of our final validation is being compiled now, say for like winter wheat, is nearly complete. And so in 2017, I'm planning to release that into publications on what we've been seeing for return on investments, and then also some different scales on if you were to utilize an algorithm that was designed for an RGB camera on a Phantom 4 as opposed to one that used a multi-spec on a Mitrice 100, which one wound up bringing home the most money when it comes down to the end of the day? Does that upgrade up to the M100 with a multi-spec actually pay off or not? And so I'd be happy to discuss those things till the day runs out, but I can say that the numbers are looking good.
So does Data Mapper support the use if it's in an RTK-equipped system?
Yes, I mean we accept georeferenced imagery. So as long as it's georeferenced, we can pretty much accept any type of format.
Okay, great. So finding the most value, I mean, what are you hearing? Where are you seeing the most value? Where do you see the most value from a system like the Smarter Farming package? Is there a certain application that you really see this benefiting the most?
I think for the feedback that we've gotten is the most straightforward is for nitrogen prescription.
Okay.
And again, to Ray Noah's point, it's not necessarily that you should just take this file and plug it into your tractor. We wish the technology was that seamless right now, but it takes years and years. When we look at some of these more advanced algorithms that we're creating and that Ray's creating, it takes years to actually calibrate this stuff and make sure that it holds up in a trained model. We use a lot of machine learning techniques throughout, and you need data, and you need to make sure that it's ground truth in order to build these models out.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And so, like you said, we've been working on it at K-State for nearly 10 years now, and now we're to the point where we're comfortable releasing them out there. So if that gives you any indication.
So on average, how much data do you get from a single flight, and then how long does it take to upload and analyze that data?
Yeah, so typically you're going to see in between 100 megabytes to a gigabyte per flight. We do have some tools that actually compress data down before you upload if you don't need the highest resolution possible. And so that certainly helps the workflow. A lot of times, unless the application asks for it, like plant counting is an example, you don't actually need the highest resolution possible. We really try to apply the process to whatever the algorithm requirement is. And to my point earlier, typically these maps, anywhere from 100 to 200 acres are going to process within 30 to 60 minutes.
Okay. So I had another question about whether these pieces would be sold separately. Do you want to address that, Pat or Tim? This is all one package. It's going to be sold together.
Yeah, it is one package at the moment. This is a new product for DJI, so we're still experimenting with the market. And we do see a lot of value in the agriculture market. So I'm sure that we will continue to develop. But as the information on if this multispectral camera will be sold separately, that's something that I don't know right now.
Okay. So we spent most of our time talking about how this applies to agriculture. I've gotten a few questions from the participants about whether this can apply to outside of agricultural easily. So is this easily transferable to other industries?
Yeah, absolutely. From our perspective, we are a remote sensing company. And so with that, it's really just that algorithm at the end that specifies what it's measuring. We do a lot of work in construction, mining, oil and gas, insurance, a whole host of industries. And the great thing with the partnership with DJI is that 90% is all foundational technology. And so again, as long as that end algorithm is measuring what you need to measure, you have a great base for the hardware and the processing goes.
And is this available just to the U.S.? Is it other countries? Where can guys get this system?
It's actually almost completely international. Obviously, there are countries that we can't send them to for different reasons, but we are shipping it really international. We're seeing a lot of pickup international as well.
Okay, great. We've got many, many more questions. Ray, do you use a 70% horizontal overlap or greater to achieve the kind of coverage that you're talking about?
It depends on the camera and the application, but I typically do 80%. And so, especially if I'm dealing with a pretty uniform corn, but if I'm in crops like wheat, I have been able to get away with 70% overlap without any issue. And so it's probably dependent on the crop. If you want to be in the safe zone, where it also still works well for three-dimensional models, also being around 80% works really well. And so then if you're flying at 122 meter AGL, and you can go ahead and have the M100 zipping along pretty good and not have to worry about ground smear too bad. And so that works out pretty well for me.
So what sort of applications are thermal being used for? Is it mainly water detection, irrigation, or are there certain types of infestations?
Well, thermal imagery can be used for a lot of things. First thing most people think about is dealing with water and irrigation management. And so they try to find out if the crop is water stressed and if they should go ahead and start irrigating again. The problem is that with just using thermal imagery on its own to make that kind of recommendation is that like an irrigated corn, it could be in the middle of July and it's 115 degrees out and it's 135 in the cornfield. The evapotranspiration just can't keep up. Transpirational pull can't keep those plants cool enough, and so they start getting hotter and leaves start to curl over. But there's actually plenty of water in the soil profile, and so that's a heat stress issue that can be misleading to you think that they're water stressed. And so thermal imagery, I like to say, is very good complementary ancillary data to bring in with soils data, like somebody asked questions about EC data for soil texture, and then also bringing it into with the multispectral imagery. From there, when you start getting multi-data angles, you can start making determinations on, well, do I have water stress, certain degree of nitrogen stress, perhaps I have the bug infestation. I really like to think of thermal being good and complementary to bring in with other imagery and data type. It's probably not something I'd use exclusively on its own because it can be misleading.
Okay, great. Well, that's all the time that we have for today's webinar. We are right at 2 o'clock. I want to thank everyone for joining us, and especially our experts Noah and Ray and Tim, as well as Pat, for chiming in about the Smarter Farming Package and helping us understand that a little bit better. Again, we will be sending all of the questions and answers through email, so if you were an attendee, you will be getting an email. And thank you again, everyone.
Hey, thank you guys for attending. If you have any questions, shoot us an email.
Thank you very much.